At the hospital, while the IV still dripped into my arm, Kaylee leaned over me, lips tight, eyes sharp, like she was about to slit something open. She shoved a folder into my lap and hissed close to my ear. "Sign the deed, old woman, or else. You're just in our way now." The hiss of her breath was louder than the heart monitor. I glanced at the page. It wasn't consent for treatment. It was the deed to my family's horse ranch, the one my late husband and I built from nothing, the one my son grew up on, the one she now wanted to take. My hands trembled, not from weakness, but fury, and the only thing more deafening than that hiss was the silence from Ethan. My son. Standing 5 feet away, arms crossed, pretending he didn't hear a damn word. He just stood there, checking his phone like I was some clerk holding up their lunch plans. And in that moment, something inside me snapped. This wasn't just a bad daughter-in-law. This was coordinated. This was war. And I had just woken up. If you've ever been blindsided by someone you once trusted, someone in your own family, you might understand the cold clarity that follows betrayal. Tell me where you're watching from right now. And if this kind of story hits close to home, just stay with me. You need to hear how it ends. The nurse had stepped out just 5 minutes before Kaylee came slithering in. I should have known when she arrived without flowers, without a hug, without even the decency to ask how I was doing. She walked in like she owned the place. That ranch is worth close to $1 million, I know that. And so does she. She doesn't care about the legacy. She doesn't care about the memories in those barns, the fence posts my husband drove in himself, or the oak tree I planted when Ethan was born. She cares about square footage and resale value, about flipping what was once a home into a profit. I looked at her, then looked at the paper. She'd already flagged the signature line with a bright orange sticker. Efficient. I'll give her that. But it was the way she looked at me, like a dying dog finally ready to be put down, that sent a chill down my spine. Not even a hint of guilt, just anticipation. "You're not well," she said, louder now, for Ethan's benefit. "It's dangerous for you to handle property on your own. We're just helping." Helping. That word again. Always used like a knife wrapped in silk. Ethan didn't even flinch. His eyes stayed glued to his phone. I stared at him, searching for some trace of the boy I raised, the one who used to cry when he scraped his knees, the one I stayed up all night with when he had that flu at age 7, the one who used to say he'd take care of me someday. All I saw was a man in a pressed shirt, afraid of his wife and too proud to admit it. I pushed the folder away slowly. Kaylee didn't miss a beat. She yanked it back and flipped to another page. "This is just a temporary transfer," she said, her voice smooth as syrup, but twice as sticky. "We'll manage things while you recover. You can take it back later." And right then, I knew she thought I was stupid. Not just weak, not just old, but stupid. And I let her think that. I let them both think that. Because if they believed I was still that same old woman who cried silently when they skipped Thanksgiving, then they wouldn't see what was coming. "Give me the pen," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Kaylee blinked, surprised, but only for a moment. She handed me the pen like a queen handing out mercy. I signed. She smiled. But what she didn't know, what Ethan didn't know, was that 3 nights ago, before my surgery, I had already contacted my lawyer, Clarence Monroe. And Clarence doesn't miss details. The real papers I signed weren't in Kaylee's folder. The real papers were with Clarence. And they cancelled every financial safety net I had been quietly providing Ethan for the past 7 years. The car lease, the credit card, the property taxes, the vet bills for their damn golden retriever, gone. And once that signature went on my transfer, Clarence would send out the dominoes. I looked up at Kaylee, smiled faintly, and handed the folder back. Her eyes glittered. Ethan let out a breath, like the meeting was over. But oh, honey, it hadn't even started. They left the room together, their voices low, excited, like they'd just scored a bargain at an estate sale. I turned my head toward the window and stared at the sky, letting the silence return. My heart didn't race, my hands didn't shake. In fact, I felt lighter than I had in years. Because that moment, the moment I let them believe they won, was the exact moment I took everything back. And this time, I wasn't going to clean up the mess for them afterward. This time, they'd learn what happens when the old woman they underestimated decides she's done playing nice. They came back the next morning like they owned the place. Kaylee barged in first, heels clacking on the hospital tile, sunglasses still on though the room was dim. She didn't greet me. She didn't ask how I slept. She didn't even look at me. She tossed a shopping bag on the chair like it meant something. Ethan followed behind her, hands in his pockets, avoiding eye contact, like the coward he had fully become. I recognized that shuffle in his feet. It used to mean guilt. Now it just meant submission. Kaylee pulled out a phone charger and a container of overpriced soup from the bag. "We brought you something light. The doctor said your digestion's slow at your age." I said nothing. I just stared at her face. That sharp little smirk she couldn't quite hide, like she was trying to hold in a laugh. I could see it in her eyes, dancing behind those lashes. She thought I had given up, thought she'd won, thought the paper in that folder meant she had finally broken the old woman with the horses and the bad knee. Ethan sat by the window, scrolling. The silence dragged. Kaylee checked her nails. "You know, it's best you don't tell anyone about the documents. Some people might not understand, especially since you're still recovering." I raised one eyebrow. She smiled wider. "People panic when they hear words like transfer. They don't get it. But this is all temporary, just for security, for the family." There it was again. Family. That word they used to justify every cut, every slap, every betrayal. I stared at her face. I had memorized it now. The exact lines around her lips when she lied. The way her brow lifted just a touch when she threw in another sugar-coated threat. She'd done it for years. I just hadn't wanted to see it. Ethan cleared his throat. "Kaylee and I are handling some of the ranch bills this week, just so you don't have to think about it." I didn't blink. "You mean the mortgage I paid off 15 years ago? The insurance I prepaid last year? The feed orders I placed in advance through December? The only bills left on that ranch were the ones they created." He shifted in his seat. "We thought, with you not being fully mobile, it was time to start thinking more long-term, about care, about the future." Kaylee's been doing research. That's when I noticed the printed brochure on the side table. It hadn't been there before. Big, soft font, pastel colors, happy seniors holding hands in wheelchairs, assisted living. Kaylee followed my eyes and leaned forward like she was giving a TED talk. Bright Pine Estates. They have 24-hour medical staff, weekly bingo, hot meals, and no stairs. It's a really nice place. My voice came out even. "You're not sending me to a damn facility." Kaylee blinked. "Of course not. I mean, not unless it becomes necessary." Ethan looked down at his shoes. She continued, voice light, almost amused. "But let's be honest. You fell. Alone. And if the neighbor hadn't found you when she did, who knows how long you would have laid there. This isn't just about the ranch. It's about your safety." She reached for my hand like she thought it would convince me. "We're not villains, Martha. We're trying to help. This is about love." That word hit like acid. Love. The same kind of love that lets a daughter-in-law talk to her husband's mother like a burden. The same kind of love that calls a lawyer behind your back and plans power of attorney. The same kind that drives to the hospital, not to comfort, but to extract. Love my ass. I pulled my hand away and said nothing. Kaylee's face didn't flinch. She wasn't here to win approval. She was here to finalize control. Just think about it, she said, standing up. She tossed a pamphlet onto my lap as if it were a done deal. We'll stop by later with the final version of the care papers. No pressure, but it'd be helpful if you signed them while you're still clear-headed, just so no one gets confused later. Ethan rose without a word. No kiss on the cheek, no glance back. And just like that, they were gone. But the burn lingered. I sat there, the brochure still on my lap, the soup untouched. I could hear the heart monitor ticking beside me like a metronome marking time. That room didn't feel like a hospital anymore. It felt like a cage, a place where you're too weak to stop anything from happening, a place where people steal from you with polite voices and pressed clothes. I had never felt more humiliated, but I had also never felt more awake. There was something about betrayal that sharpened your vision. The colors were clearer now. The masks had fallen. I saw them for what they were. Opportunists, liars, parasites. And I wasn't going to let them win. I pressed the call button. The nurse walked in, chipper. Yes, Martha. Can you hand me my phone, please? She nodded, grabbed it from the drawer and handed it over. I opened the messages and scrolled to Clarence. It's done. They fell for it. Clarence replied instantly. Understood. Proceeding with execution. I stared at the screen a moment longer, then deleted the messages. It was all in motion now. The woman they thought they broke yesterday was gone. The woman in this bed today, she was the reckoning. The knock on the hospital door wasn't gentle. It was sharp, intentional. The kind of knock that came from someone who had already decided they were walking into your space, whether you wanted them there or not. Kaylee didn't wait for permission. She pushed the door open like she owned the floor. Behind her came Ethan, not far behind, like always. His face was tighter today, pale around the mouth. He didn't meet my eyes. Kaylee held a manila envelope in one hand and her phone in the other. She was in a fitted cream blazer, heels too tall for a hospital visit, and that look on her face. That slick, practiced smile of someone who thought she was closing a deal, not standing at the bedside of her husband's mother. Martha. Good morning. I have the updated documents. Everything's ready. I didn't answer. I adjusted the blanket on my lap and sat up a little straighter. She glanced at Ethan like she expected him to say something. He didn't. She continued anyway. We took care of the fees for the appraisal. The lawyer who drafted the documents works with my father's firm, so the turnaround was quick. He's been through this process dozens of times. He said it's pretty common for people your age. There was the smile again, polite, sharp, drenched in false empathy. She set the envelope on the rolling tray near my bed and tapped it with her finger. This version is cleaner, more direct, and it includes a clause that protects you in case anything changes with your mental capacity. That way you won't have to deal with future paperwork. I stared at the envelope. Ethan cleared his throat, barely audible. We just want to make sure everything's taken care of while you're recovering. The ranch is a lot. It's not safe for you to manage alone. There it was again. The same script. The same justification wrapped in concern. It wasn't about the ranch. It was never about the ranch. It was about power, control, money. Kaylee pulled out a pen. She clicked it with a little too much energy. If you sign now, we can get the process moving, and we'll handle the logistics while you rest. I didn't move. I looked at Ethan. His eyes flicked up for a second, then dropped back down. You knew. You knew exactly what she was planning. He shifted in place. I could see the discomfort ripple through him. He didn't deny it. He didn't say a word. My voice came out cold. The lawyer's name is Robert Crane, from Lexington. He's the one who notarized the documents you brought yesterday. And he also happens to be the same man who filed for a commercial loan against the ranch 2 weeks ago. Kaylee's head snapped up. I kept going. You didn't think I'd check. But I did. You tried to mortgage my land without my consent. I have the record. The filing never finalized because the deed's not in your name. But the attempt is logged, dated, tied directly to your email and your phone number. Kaylee took a step back. Ethan's face drained. I told Clarence to investigate everything. Emails, accounts, phone records, every trace. You didn't just want to take the ranch, you wanted to cash it out and walk away before I even left this hospital. Kaylee's voice cracked. You were unconscious. We were making decisions for the family. That land is... I cut her off. That land is mine. It was my husband's. It's where my son was born. It's where I bled, where I buried dogs, where I planted trees with bare hands. And you tried to rip it away while I was lying here with tubes in my arms. Ethan finally spoke. It was just a contingency. Nothing was finalized. But even he didn't sound like he believed that anymore. I looked at him. Not her, him, because this was the part that hurt, that truly gutted me. You stood there. You listened. You let her speak to me like I was some animal. You watched her try to push me into a nursing home, like I was an inconvenience to be managed. He opened his mouth, but I raised my hand. And last week, while I was still sedated, you gave her access to the ranch's business account. You authorized changes to the banking login. Clarence traced the IP address. It was done from your laptop. Silence. Thick and heavy. Kaylee stepped forward. Martha, we can discuss this. You don't have to make it dramatic. We're still a family. That word snapped something loose inside me. Family. I picked up the envelope, looked at it, then tore it clean down the middle. Kaylee gasped. Ethan flinched. I threw the pieces into the trash bin beside the bed. You want dramatic? You'll get it. I pressed the call button. The nurse came in within seconds. Yes, Ms. Ellison? Call my lawyer, Clarence Monroe. Tell him we're going live. The nurse blinked, nodded, and left the room. Kaylee turned to Ethan, panic flashing for the first time. She's bluffing. She's confused. She doesn't know what she's doing. I laughed. Short. Bitter. Confused? You think that because I'm old? Because I got dizzy and fell on wet tile? Because my back aches and I don't dress like a damn influencer? You think that means I don't see you? But I've seen you from the start. You've always looked at me like I was temporary, like I was the last obstacle in the way of a better life. Well, congratulations. You've removed the obstacle. Because now I'm not protecting you anymore. The nurse returned and handed me the phone. Clarence's voice came through crisp and sure. It's done, Martha. You ready? I locked eyes with Kaylee. Proceed. And just like that, the trap they walked into yesterday closed. The phone call with Clarence lasted exactly 4 minutes. In those 4 minutes, the ground beneath Ethan and Kaylee began to crack. They just didn't know it yet. By the time I ended the call, Clarence had already initiated the suspension of all financial authorizations tied to my name. Every auto payment, every bank draft, every shared account where I was the silent guarantor behind Ethan's facade of stability. The dominoes had started to fall, quietly, swiftly, irreversibly. Kaylee was pacing by the door like a caged animal. Her shoes tapped fast, her breathing picked up. She kept glancing back at Ethan, waiting for him to take control. But he couldn't. He was still stuck in the corner, jaw clenched, arms folded so tight his knuckles turned white. It was the look of a man realizing the floor was giving way, and he'd never learned how to swim. I turned toward the window, sunlight streaking in through the blinds, warm across my face. It was almost beautiful, peaceful, the kind of light you notice right before a storm. Kaylee's voice cracked first. "You have no idea what you're doing." I didn't turn. "You think cutting us off makes you powerful. You think this makes you noble. But this will backfire." Still, I didn't respond. She crossed the room in 3 fast strides and slapped her hand down on my bedside tray, rattling the water glass. "You think you're clever, but I've dealt with stubborn old women before. You're not special. You're just a bitter relic holding on to dirt and fences like they matter more than your own family." Ethan flinched. I finally turned and met her eyes. And for the first time since she walked into my life, she blinked. "I'm not holding on to dirt. I'm holding on to legacy, something you've never respected and clearly never understood. I've spent years cleaning up your messes, paying your bills, covering for your arrogance while you strutted around like the ranch was already yours. You don't get to call me bitter because I finally decided to stop funding my own erasure." Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. Ethan finally spoke, voice rough and low. "We needed help. That's all this was. We were drowning. You think we planned this like some evil scheme, but we didn't. We were just desperate." I turned to him slowly. "No. Desperation is when you come to your mother and say you need a loan, a conversation, a plan. What you did was theft in slow motion. You manipulated. You lied. You authorized loans in my name. You brought appraisers to the property without my knowledge. You tried to move money you didn't earn. That's not desperation. That's betrayal." He looked away, jaw tightening. "And the worst part," I said, voice steady, "is not even the money. It's that I looked at you and still saw my son, the boy who used to run barefoot through the pasture, who used to hug me so hard I couldn't breathe. I thought you were still in there, but you're not. Not anymore." Silence gripped the room. Even Kaylee had gone quiet. I took a slow breath. "Clarence has already contacted the bank. The joint accounts are frozen. The credit lines under my name are being shut down. The insurance policies? Cancelled. The car? Towed by the end of the day, unless you find another co-signer. And as for the ranch, the title remains untouched. But there's now a legal block on any attempts to transfer, lease, or mortgage the land for the next 6 months. Any attempt will flag federal oversight." Kaylee sank into the visitor chair like someone had taken a bat to her knees. Ethan stared at the floor. "You went too far," I said, finally letting the venom out. "You both went too far. You tried to erase me before I was even gone. So now you'll get exactly what you built." Nothing. The door opened suddenly. It was the floor administrator. A tall man in scrubs with a clipboard and a radio clipped to his chest. He looked surprised to see the tension, but quickly recovered. "Ms. Ellison, we've received a call from Mr. Clarence Monroe. He's requested immediate restriction of all visitors not listed on your current health authorization. I just need verbal confirmation from you." I nodded. "Yes. Effective immediately. Only those pre-approved by Clarence may visit. No exceptions." He glanced at Ethan and Kaylee, already uncomfortable. "Understood. I'll inform the staff." Kaylee stood up fast. "You can't block us from seeing you. You're sick. You're confused. You don't know what you're doing. I met her eyes one last time. I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm finally choosing myself. The administrator opened the door wider and gestured for them to leave. Kaylee stormed out first. Ethan hesitated. He turned, just slightly, like he might say something. Apologize. Reach out. But then he didn't. He walked out without another word. The door closed behind them with a soft click. I let the silence settle. It was quiet, clean. The kind of quiet you get after a storm flattens the trees, tears off the roof, and leaves you standing in the rubble. But there's something holy in that moment, when the noise is gone and you're still standing. Because then, and only then, do you start rebuilding. And this time, I wasn't rebuilding for anyone but me. By the end of the day, the cracks had turned into fractures. Clarence didn't waste a second. The moment I gave the go-ahead, he unleashed everything we had quietly prepared. My hospital room became command central. Phone calls flowed in like clockwork, notifications pinged with each completed action, my power of attorney revoked, all banking access locked, asset protections triggered, the legal freeze on the ranch confirmed. Everything they thought they controlled was collapsing in real time. But the real explosion came at 4:12 p.m. That was when the banker from Lexington called Ethan directly to inform him that the $185,000 loan application he had co-signed using my name had officially been flagged for fraud. Clarence made sure I had a front row seat to that moment. The door to my room burst open. No knock, no warning. Ethan charged in first, face flushed, tie loose, breath uneven. Kaylee followed close behind, but this time she was different. She wasn't storming in with swagger. She was twitchy, jaw clenched, nails digging into her palm, like someone holding a grenade with the pin already out. Ethan slammed a document down on the edge of my bed. They froze our accounts. All of them. Every dollar. I stayed silent. Kaylee stepped forward, voice shaking under the surface. Your lawyer called the bank. He told them to flag the application. They're investigating it now. Do you even understand what you've done? I looked at the paper. It was a loan application. My name, my social security number, my home address. But the signature at the bottom wasn't mine, not even close. So you forged it. Kaylee's face twisted. We were going to pay it back. We just needed the cash flow to cover the ranch taxes. That land bleeds money. You're the one who always said it's expensive to keep horses. I raised an eyebrow. So you thought identity theft was a reasonable solution? Ethan jumped in, louder now. We were out of options. The feed suppliers were threatening to pull contracts. The repairs on the barn are overdue. Kaylee's parents already helped us. We couldn't keep asking them. I kept my eyes locked on his. So you asked me instead. Without actually asking. Ethan looked like he'd been punched. Kaylee snapped. We're not the villains here. You're not some innocent bystander. You let us think you were broke. You played the part. You could have helped. You just wanted to see us struggle. You enjoyed this. That was it. I sat up straighter. You want to know why I never told you how much I had? Because I knew what would happen the second you saw a dollar sign attached to my name. I lived modestly to protect what your father and I built, because he trusted me to carry it forward. And I was stupid enough to believe you would earn it, not steal it. Kaylee's eyes burned. I gave up everything to be with Ethan. I took care of that ranch when you were too tired to ride. I dealt with the debt, the neighbors, the board meetings. I gave you years. I didn't blink. You didn't give. You positioned. You waited. You calculated. And when you saw an opening, you took it. Ethan raised his voice. You think I planned this? You think I'm just some leech who sat back and let her do all the dirty work. That's not how it was. I turned to him, and this time my voice dropped, sharp and cold. No. What you did was worse. You knew. You watched it all unfold. You let her march into my room and demand signatures. You stood outside while she tried to institutionalize me. And you didn't say a word. He opened his mouth, but nothing came. I pushed the document back toward him. Clarence already filed a complaint with the state attorney's office. The bank flagged the application. That means full investigation, digital records, text messages, voicemails. You know how thorough federal fraud teams are. Once this lands, it will affect everything. Business licenses, credit, employment. Kaylee looked like she couldn't breathe. You wouldn't. You wouldn't destroy your own family. I tilted my head. You already did that. Ethan stepped back like I'd struck him. I kept going. And if either of you think this ends with a frozen account, you're wrong. Because next week, I go public. Press, community board, local investor networks. Every circle I belong to will know what you did. You won't just be broke, you'll be radioactive. Kaylee turned and kicked the chair hard enough to send it flying into the wall. This is insane. You're throwing us away over money. I snapped back instantly. This was never about money. It was about respect, about trust. And you burned both to the ground. Ethan lowered his head into his hands. His voice came out hollow. What do we do now? I didn't answer. Kaylee stormed to the door. She paused, turned, eyes filled with something between rage and disbelief. You've made a mistake. One day you'll regret this. I stared right at her. No. One day you'll understand it. And with that, she was gone. Ethan stayed frozen by the window. He didn't speak, didn't move, just stood there, like if he held still long enough, time would rewind and the pieces would reset. But there was no going back. Not anymore. Not after this. And in that silence I felt it again. Not fear, not sadness, power. The kind of power that only comes when you finally stop asking for permission to be respected. I woke up to the sound of the nurse whispering outside my door. Her voice was tight, barely audible, but the words slipped through the cracked frame. She's got another visitor. Not on the list. There was a pause. Then the floor manager answered low and sharp. I don't care who she says she is. If she's not approved, she doesn't get in. Seconds later, my door swung open and in stepped Lucy. Not my granddaughter, not a niece, not even technically family. Lucy worked part-time at the local feed co-op near the ranch. She used to call me Miss Martha and help load the heavier bags when Ethan couldn't be bothered to show up. I hadn't seen her in months. She was young, bright, and always sharper than she let on. But this time, she looked different. Jaw locked, face pale, both hands gripped around her phone. I came here because you need to see this. I'm not supposed to be here, but someone has to show you. She handed me her phone. The video was grainy, but clear enough. The timestamp was from last night. Security footage. Feed from the back of the ranch's east barn. In the footage, Kaylee stood next to a man in a navy suit. She pointed toward the land behind the fence line. He nodded, wrote something in a folder. Then he handed her what looked like a survey map. She took it, shook his hand, and walked off. Below the footage was a caption. Kaylee Dawson caught showing restricted property to real estate developer. I looked at Lucy. It's already on the community Facebook page. Some ranchers are furious, especially the ones whose water access runs through your southern line. If she tried to sell development rights, it could cut off their pasture irrigation. My throat burned. How long has this been up? 4 hours. over 7,000 views, 32 shares. Clarence called me when he saw it. He told me to come here first. The room spun for half a second before rage steadied me again. She didn't just forge my name. She tried to sell land that wasn't legally hers. That land wasn't just valuable. It was vital. A section of it included protected wildlife corridors, easements, and she had walked a developer right through it like she had the title in her purse. I reached for the phone, dialed Clarence. No hesitation. She's done. Start the formal cease and desist. I want it served by tonight. Already drafted. He paused. But there's more. I waited. The same man she met with. His firm has already filed preliminary paperwork with the county office. They're expecting title transfer approval next week, meaning Kaylee promised them something she can't legally deliver. She's committed civil fraud. Potential criminal if they push. I didn't speak. Clarence continued. I recommend we escalate. Full legal action. We file to bar her from stepping foot on the property again. Ethan too, if he's complicit. He is. Understood. The papers will be ready in 2 hours. Do you want me to notify the sheriff's office as well? Yes. I ended the call. Looked at Lucy. She nodded like she'd already known everything I was about to do. When the door opened again, I didn't even flinch. Kaylee entered without knocking, face stiff, makeup uneven. She didn't have the energy to pretend anymore. This wasn't a power play. This was the aftermath, the desperation, the collapse. Behind her came Ethan, eyes bloodshot, wrinkled shirt, slower this time, no mask of indifference, just a man unraveling. Kaylee went straight for it. You humiliated us. I stayed quiet. Ethan spoke, voice hollow. We can't access anything. Every account is frozen. Our names are flagged on the ranch deed. Even our credit cards are declined. Kaylee snapped again. You posted that video. You want to destroy us in front of the whole town. I turned toward her. You walked a developer through my land and promised to sell what wasn't yours. You tried to flip protected land for cash. That video wasn't mine. It was the truth catching up to you. Ethan sat down hard in the visitor chair. They're calling from the sheriff's office. There's a civil injunction coming, a restraining order. They said we might face charges if we go back to the ranch. Kaylee's voice cracked. Do you want us arrested? I didn't answer her. Instead, I turned to Ethan. You forged my name. You accessed accounts without permission. You tried to use my fall as justification to institutionalize me. You backed every one of her lies. And now you ask what I want? I stood slowly, pulling the IV cart with me, every bone in my body screaming but my voice steady. What I want is for you to leave. Kaylee clenched her fists. You can't push us out of your life like this. We're your family. I stepped closer. You pushed yourselves out. The minute you decided my usefulness had an expiration date. Ethan finally looked up at me, eyes wet. We made mistakes. I nodded. Yes, you did. And now, you live with them. He stood up. What happens now? Now, I said, you get to learn what it feels like to start from nothing. The silence hung between us. Heavy. Final. Kaylee turned, shoved the door open, and walked out without a word. Ethan lingered a moment longer, then followed. The door clicked shut behind them, and I exhaled for the first time in weeks. Not because it was over, but because now it had truly begun. The hospital released me on a Friday. By Saturday morning, I stood on my own porch for the first time in weeks. Clarence and the sheriff's office had followed through with precision. A civil restraining order had already been filed, preventing Kaylee and Ethan from stepping foot on the property. Their names were scrubbed from everything. All bank connections dissolved. all access revoked. But I wasn't finished. They had tried to humiliate me quietly, behind closed doors, whispered conversations, signed papers, legal tricks. Now, it was my turn to speak, and I chose to do it in the most public way possible. Clarence called the press. The Sunday town hall at the county courthouse was already scheduled. Community members were gathering for the annual Agriculture Committee meeting. I requested 15 minutes at the end of the public forum. They gave me 30. I walked in wearing black. Not for mourning, but for battle. My boots clicked sharp on the polished floor. Every eye followed me as I made my way to the front row. Ethan and Kaylee weren't there. They wouldn't have dared. I waited through the routine talk of drought forecasts, water allotments, soil reports. All of it felt distant, like background noise to the storm I was about to unleash. Finally, the moderator called my name. I stood, took the microphone, and looked at faces I had known for 40 years. Farmers, ranchers, feed suppliers, the same people who came to our barn dances, who borrowed our backhoe in winter, who helped rebuild the west fence after the tornado. I spoke plainly. Some of you may have heard rumors, others have seen the video. I want you to hear the truth from me. My voice didn't tremble. Last month, while I was hospitalized, my daughter-in-law attempted to transfer legal ownership of my land without my consent. She forged documents. She met with developers. She promised them parcels of protected soil we all rely on. She tried to sell what wasn't hers. The room went still. I looked them all in the eyes. They did this not out of ignorance, but out of greed. And my own son stood beside her. He authorized transactions. He allowed my accounts to be raided. He watched her push me toward a nursing home and called it love. A murmur ran through the crowd, sharp whispers, shaking heads. One rancher near the back crossed his arms and muttered something to the man beside him. I stepped closer. This isn't just my fight. This is about how we treat the people who built the foundations we now stand on. The elderly are not disposable. We are not liabilities. We are the ones who kept these fields running long before the spreadsheets and marketing consultants arrived. A long pause. Then I dropped the final stone. As of this morning, I have redirected the entirety of my estate into a trust, a public fund, designed to protect legacy lands from exploitation. Any rancher above the age of 65 can apply for assistance, financial support, legal protection, oversight. I will not be stolen from, and I will not stand by while others are. The room erupted. Claps, cheers, shouts of agreement. Several farmers stood to their feet. Some even pounded the table. I saw eyes glass over, not with pity, with fury, with respect, with vindication. I stepped back from the mic and nodded to Clarence, who stood silently near the wall, arms folded. Outside, reporters were already waiting. I spoke again, on camera this time. No spin, no soft edges. I told them everything, about the forged loan, about the secret meetings, about the hospital confrontation, the video, the lies, the fallout. I named names. I handed them the documents Clarence had cleared for release. It was surgical, it was honest, and it was final. By the time the afternoon sun dipped low, the town had heard the story. Not the version Kaylee wanted, not the lie Ethan had tried to hide behind, but the raw truth. That night, local media aired the piece. Headlines blazed across Facebook. The footage looped over and over. Martha Ellison, betrayed by her own blood, fights back and wins. Messages flooded in. Neighbors, strangers, women who had stayed silent for too long. Men who had watched their parents fade under pressure and manipulation. They saw themselves in the story. They saw what could happen when silence turned into action. But the most unexpected message came from Amelia Sloan, Ethan's ex-girlfriend. She had left town years ago, quietly, after a rough split with him. No one ever talked about it. But now, she sent a short email to Clarence, asking to pass something along to me. The message was simple. I'm proud of you. I wish I'd had your strength back then. I stared at the screen for a long time. Strength. It wasn't something I was born with. It was something forged, in heartbreak, in betrayal, in hospital rooms, in moments when you realize the only person who's going to save you is you. That night, I stood on my porch alone. The land stretched wide in front of me. The stars were out, crisp, clear. No voices, no threats, no paperwork slid across a hospital tray. Just me, my name, my land, and the storm finally breaking. Under the glare of the courthouse parking lot lights, I stepped out of Clarence's truck to a crowd I didn't expect. Dozens of people stood there, neighbors, ranchers, folks I hadn't seen in years. Some held signs, others clapped. The air was thick with the kind of justice you can feel in your bones. Ethan was already inside. Kaylee, too. The court order was clear. Today wasn't about trials or criminal charges. Not yet. This was the civil reckoning, the one where everything they had taken, everything they had planned, would be officially returned to its rightful owner. Me. I moved through the crowd slowly. Some touched my arm. Others whispered their support. But I didn't speak. I kept walking. Head up, spine straight. The old woman they thought they could erase was walking into that building to finish what they started. Inside, the courtroom was silent. The clerk announced my name and Clarence's. Then came Ethan and Kaylee. When they entered, there was a chill. Kaylee looked gaunt, her sharpness dulled. Her hands clenched a manila folder so tightly I thought the paper might tear. Ethan followed behind her, eyes fixed low. No smug grin this time, no arrogance, just dread. The judge didn't waste time. Ms. Ellison, you have filed to nullify the unauthorized power of attorney, declare the land trust valid, and remove all financial ties between yourself and the respondents. Is that correct? I nodded once. Kaylee's lawyer stood, young, nervous, sweating. Your Honor, we'd like to offer a statement on behalf of my clients. But the judge cut him off. This isn't about statements. This is about facts, and the facts are plain. Clarence handed over a stack of documents. Every lie they told, every transfer they tried to slip through the system, every dollar misused. Kaylee's forged signature was the nail. Ethan's email approving the transaction, the hammer. The judge flipped through the file with methodical disinterest, like someone reading the obituary of a person they never liked. Then came the twist I had been saving. Clarence stood. In addition to the submitted evidence, we would like to introduce a sworn affidavit from Mr. Bruce Cartwright, Regional Director at Highview Real Estate Holdings. It outlines a secret agreement negotiated with Mrs. Kaylee Ellison regarding the sale and redevelopment of the Ellison Ranch. The room shifted. Even the judge raised an eyebrow. He continued. The affidavit confirms Mrs. Ellison approached Mr. Cartwright with false proof of land ownership and promised to subdivide the western field into commercial storage plots. This agreement was contingent on her pushing Ms. Martha Ellison into full-time assisted care within 2 weeks. Gasps broke through the courtroom. Kaylee froze. She opened her folder like she might object, but her hands trembled. No words came. Nothing could explain that away. The judge's voice hardened. Let me be clear. What I see here is not just financial misconduct. I see a calculated campaign to isolate and erase an elder for personal gain. You used your proximity, your influence, and her trust to exploit her. Kaylee sat, face pale. Ethan looked like a boy who had just realized he wasn't the smartest person in the room. I didn't look at them. I spoke once. Your Honor, I have no interest in punishment, only protection. This land is no longer about me. It's about the legacy of this town. I just want it back where it belongs. The judge nodded. So be it. Effective immediately, the trust stands. All assets are returned, all prior authorizations voided. Furthermore, this court recommends that this case be forwarded to the district attorney for further investigation into criminal elder abuse and fraud. Gavel down. It was done. As we exited the courtroom, Clarence beside me, Kaylee shot up from her bench. You think this is over? You think you can just humiliate us and walk away? I turned to face her. I already walked away. What you're standing in is the fallout. She lunged forward, but Ethan grabbed her arm. He wasn't stopping her for my sake. He was afraid of what another outburst would cost him now. Clarence stepped between us anyway. Keep your distance. I didn't say another word. Outside, the media waited again, but this time I didn't stop for them. Clarence shielded me with his body, and we walked straight through. I had nothing left to prove, not to the cameras, not to the town, not even to them. I had done what they thought I never would. I had faced them. I had spoken. I had taken back everything they tried to bury. The only sound I wanted to hear now was the wind through the pastures, the crunch of gravel under my boots, the creak of the porch swing. Justice wasn't just served. It was televised, documented, sealed. But even more than that, it was felt, deep in the marrow of a town that remembered who really built it. Under the amber light of early evening, I sat alone on the porch swing, the one Ethan built for my 65th birthday. It creaked with each slow sway, the sound mingling with the rustle of the trees, the distant mooing of the cattle, and the sharp click of Clarence's boots approaching. He didn't speak right away, just handed me a glass of sweet tea and sat on the edge of the stairs, arms resting on his knees. It's quiet now, he said. Too quiet, I replied. But that wasn't true. Inside me, the noise was deafening. All the signatures, all the documents, all the betrayals. My son, my flesh and blood, had not only handed over my home but signed off on my mental capacity as compromised to expedite the sale. His own mother, declared unfit. I could still see the digital signature on the affidavit. Ethan Ellison, clear as day. But justice was done. The judge made it final. And yet, that kind of betrayal doesn't just wash off. Clarence finally broke the silence. You should be proud. I looked at him. I am. But I'm also tired. Bone-deep tired. He nodded like he understood. Then he pulled a worn envelope from his coat. Mail came while we were gone. This one's from the state's Attorney General's office. My heart stalled. I took it, hands trembling slightly, opened the flap, unfolded the pages. It was what I feared, and what I hoped for. A formal investigation had been launched, not civil, criminal, elder abuse, fraud, forgery, and willful exploitation. Ethan and Kaylee weren't just facing social embarrassment or the loss of the ranch. They were now subjects of a statewide probe. Clarence leaned back. They'll panic. They already have. The phone calls had started just hours after the ruling. Ethan left 6 voicemails, each one messier than the last. I'm sorry, Mum. I didn't know she was doing all of that. We were just trying to get ahead. It was just temporary. We would have fixed it. You can't let this happen. And finally, please, I'm still your son. That one stayed with me the longest, not because it softened me, but because of how familiar it sounded. Like the same voice that used to say, "Mama, watch me ride," or "Mama, I made this for you." That boy was long gone, but the man he became still carried that voice. And now it was cracking under the weight of consequence. Kaylee, on the other hand, had gone silent. Not a word, not a message, not a glance. She was smart. She knew speaking now would only make it worse. And it did get worse. 2 days later, Clarence and I drove into town to pick up a shipment. The moment we stepped out of the truck, folks were whispering. A woman across the street pointed to the local paper in the newsstand. The headline screamed in bold print, "Local couple under investigation for elder fraud." Beneath it was a photo of Ethan and Kaylee walking out of court, faces twisted with anger. Someone must have taken it during their exit while Clarence was shielding me. It wasn't just a scandal anymore. It was a wildfire. By afternoon, the calls came from banks. Joint accounts were flagged, lines of credit frozen. Kaylee's employer placed her on leave. Ethan's business partners started distancing. Their whole life was unraveling, just like they planned for mine. I didn't gloat, but I didn't grieve either. That night, I cooked dinner for Clarence and myself. Roast chicken, potatoes, the same meal Ethan used to request every birthday. Halfway through the meal, the doorbell rang. I froze. Clarence stood first, his hand instinctively brushing the grip of the revolver mounted near the doorframe. He peeked through the curtain. "It's him." "Let him in," I said. He opened the door. Ethan stood there, disheveled, pale, dark circles under his eyes. A man unraveled, he didn't wait for permission. He stepped inside. I stayed seated. He looked around like he hadn't been in the house before, like every memory had been scrubbed. Then his eyes landed on me. I came to talk. So talk. He walked closer, hands trembling. "Mum, I know I messed up. I got swept into something and Kaylee, she was pressuring me. I didn't know how deep it would go. I just wanted us to have a better life. But it went too far." He looked me straight in the eyes. "I miss my family. I miss you." I let the silence stretch. Then I said, "Family doesn't steal from each other. Family doesn't erase your name off the land your ancestors bled to build. And family sure as hell doesn't sign you into a memory care facility before your time." His face collapsed. "I didn't mean to," but I cut him off. "You meant every step. You just didn't mean to get caught." He looked at Clarence, then back at me. "So what happens now?" "What happens now is that I live my life, and you live yours. Whatever the court decides next is between you and the state." He stepped closer. "Mum, please, I'm begging you." Clarence stood up slowly. "That's enough, Ethan." Ethan looked between us, his face hardened. "So that's it. You get your land back. You get your little parade in town. And I'm just the villain now." I met his gaze. "You were the villain the moment you chose greed over your mother." He stood there for another second, then stormed out. The door slammed so hard the picture frames rattled. I didn't move. Clarence came and sat beside me again. "You did what you had to do." I nodded, but that didn't make it easier. Justice costs something. Sometimes it costs the very people you once loved. Under the dim courtroom lights, the room buzzed with whispers. Spectators filled every bench. Reporters hovered like vultures near the entrance. The morning had the heaviness of a final verdict, even before the judge entered. I sat in the front row, stone-faced, Clarence at my side, my hands folded in my lap like steel traps. I wasn't here to beg or weep or hope. I was here to finish what they started. Across from me, Ethan sat beside Kaylee. He looked smaller now. His tailored suit couldn't hide the shake in his knee or the way he kept licking his dry lips. Kaylee wore black, not in mourning, but for effect. She probably thought it made her look solemn, dignified. It only made her look guilty. The court was called to order. The judge entered. His gavel struck once. Papers shuffled. Murmurs died. Today's hearing wasn't about civil damages or property division. That had already been decided. Today was about criminal responsibility. The state's attorney rose first. Her voice was firm, her words clipped. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here to present evidence of deliberate and premeditated elder exploitation. Ms. Kaylee Ellison and Mr. Ethan Ellison not only falsified medical documents to gain financial control of Ms. Marilyn Rowe's estate, but actively siphoned funds through shell accounts, forged signatures, and manipulated healthcare records. Each word cut through the room like a blade, and with every point, Kaylee's face hardened. She sat still, but her fingers twitched, her knuckles white. The attorney continued. We have digital proof of the altered assessments. Witness testimony from former aides at the facility. Financial transfers linked to both defendants. Then came the bomb. And finally, we submit into evidence a recorded conversation between Ms. Ellison and her private financial consultant, obtained with proper warrant, where she discusses moving liquid assets offshore in anticipation of potential litigation. Gasps echoed. Kaylee flinched. Ethan turned to her, stunned. You did that? His voice was low but loud enough for the judge to lift an eyebrow. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Her silence confirmed it. Defense scrambled. They requested a recess. Denied. The judge motioned for the evidence to be played. A recording crackled to life. Kaylee's voice filled the courtroom, cool and arrogant. If this goes sideways, we shift the funds to the Cayman account under Ellis Holdings. My name doesn't show. Ethan's doesn't either. Marilyn won't even know what hit her. She still thinks we're building a future here. The room turned to ice. Ethan buried his face in his hands. Kaylee didn't look at him. She just stared straight ahead, jaw locked, eyes glassy. I didn't move. I didn't smile. But my spine straightened. The judge called both attorneys forward, then recessed for deliberation. Outside the courthouse, the sun was brutal. The heat pressed down on my shoulders as we waited near the fountain. Clarence stood with arms crossed, guarding the silence like a soldier. Reporters circled, but none dared speak. They waited, notebooks and cameras in hand, sensing the storm was peaking. Then the doors swung open. The bailiff called our names. We returned to our seats. The judge entered again, this time without hesitation. The court finds sufficient cause to proceed with formal charges against both defendants. Bail is denied for Ms. Kaylee Ellison, pending further review of the offshore account allegation. Mr. Ethan Ellison is granted conditional bail under supervised release. I heard the cuffs before I saw them. Kaylee jerked back in her seat. You can't be serious. The bailiff didn't respond, just pulled her to her feet, twisted her arms behind her back. I'm pregnant. Her voice cracked. That brought the room to a halt. The judge paused. Is this verified? Not yet. But I am. Tears welled in her eyes. Ethan stood, stunned. You told me it wasn't possible. She turned to him, eyes sharp. You don't get to act betrayed. You left me hanging. The bailiff motioned to move her. She screamed. This is your fault, Ethan. I did everything for you. For us. You begged me to handle it. And I did. You were too weak to protect your own mother, so I did what needed to be done. She turned her glare to me. You think you won? You lost everything. Your family, your son, and soon your grandchild. You'll die alone on that land, surrounded by dust and regret. The judge banged the gavel. Security tightened. Kaylee was dragged out, heels scraping against the floor, her sobs echoing behind her. Ethan stood frozen, pale, empty. The judge turned to him. Mr. Ellison, do you wish to make a statement before conditions of release are imposed? He shook his head slowly. Then he turned to me. I thought I could fix it. I thought if I stayed quiet, it would pass. But I broke something that can't be repaired. I didn't reply. Not yet. The judge spoke again. This hearing is adjourned. Gavel struck. People started filing out. Clarence touched my arm. I stood slowly. As we walked past Ethan, he reached out. Just a finger's width. Mum. I stopped. He looked up, eyes filled with something between guilt and ruin. I miss you. I studied his face, the one I kissed goodnight for decades, the one I once held after scraped knees, after graduation, after his wedding. And I whispered without blinking, then you should have fought for me, instead of selling me off. He didn't follow. Outside, the sun had dimmed. Clouds rolled in like curtains, swallowing the heat. Clarence opened the truck door for me. I paused, looked back at the courthouse. The walls that once echoed with lies now held a sliver of justice. And I breathed, for the first time in years, like the storm had finally passed. Under the sterile lights of the courthouse lobby, everything felt louder than it should have. The shuffle of shoes against marble, the low hum of voices behind me, the echo of a gavel that still rang in my bones. But above it all, what I heard most clearly was the silence between Ethan and me. He didn't try to follow when Clarence and I left that day. He didn't call, didn't write, not even a lawyer's letter. And honestly, I expected that. Because when the dust settles, cowards never come looking for the mess they made. The state was moving forward with its case against Kaylee. They froze the shell accounts, seized the vehicles, audited everything. The land, thankfully, was never touched. My will, my original power of attorney, and Clarence's legal counter-filings had protected what little dignity they hadn't already tried to erase. I spent most of my days walking the fields. The air tasted cleaner now, the trees somehow taller. Clarence had hired a few old friends to help repair the fencing near the west boundary and tend to the garden beds Kaylee once let rot. But inside the house, I kept everything the same. Not out of nostalgia, but as a quiet defiance. Then one morning, the doorbell rang. It wasn't loud, just one chime. But it froze me where I stood in the hallway. I knew that rhythm. When I opened the door, Ethan stood there, alone. No bags, no car in sight. Just him, pale and thinner than before, like he'd been hollowed out from the inside. I didn't say anything, just stepped aside. He walked in slow, eyes scanning the walls like they were museums of a life he'd abandoned. You left the kitchen the same. It wasn't a question, so I didn't answer. He stood by the table, the same one Kaylee had once tried to throw out, claiming it was too old and didn't match her aesthetic. Now Ethan traced its edge with his fingertips like it was sacred. I sat across from him. His hands trembled slightly as he rested them on the wood. The state offered me a deal. His voice was hoarse, like he hadn't used it much lately. They dropped some charges in exchange for testimony. Against her. Full cooperation. They wanted everything, every transfer, every conversation, every lie. And you gave it to them. His eyes met mine. Yes, all of it. Good. He hesitated. They offered me immunity on a few counts. I'm still liable financially, but prison's off the table. I'll be in debt for years, but I'm free. I stared at him. That word used to mean so much. Now it tasted bitter. She's almost 6 months along, still claiming it's mine. But I'm asking for a paternity test through the court. If it's mine, I'll do what I'm supposed to. But I won't let her raise that child alone. Not if it means another life shaped by her venom. I said nothing, just listened. He needed to say it more than I needed to hear it. And then he paused, swallowed, and looked at me differently. I've been in therapy. Court mandated, yes, but I kept going even after. And it's the first time I've had to actually face what I did. Not just what I let her do, what I chose to ignore. How many chances you gave me, how many warnings, and how many times I turned my back on the woman who raised me, fed me, fought for me. My throat clenched. He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper, placed it gently on the table. I found this in one of the old boxes at the lawyer's office. It was a letter. You wrote it to me when I graduated high school. I must have thrown it in a drawer back then, never opened it. I unfolded it slowly. My own handwriting stared back at me. A message from a mother to her son, written in love, stored away and forgotten. I read the first few lines, then stopped. I remember writing it. I remember the hope in every word. And now, looking at Ethan, I wondered where that version of him had gone. How long ago it had vanished. I'm not here to ask for forgiveness, he said quietly. I'm not owed that. But I needed to return it to you, because you're still my mother. And that letter, it reminded me of who I used to be, who you raised me to be. The room stayed still. I stood, folded the letter, and tucked it back into the envelope. You can stay for dinner, I said. Clarence is making stew. After that, I'd like you to go. He nodded slowly. No protests, no pleading, just acceptance. Later that night, as the sun dropped behind the trees and the farmhouse bathed in golden light, I watched Ethan carry his bowl to the sink. He didn't leave a mess. He didn't try to linger. He just turned to me and said, "Thank you for not slamming the door." And I replied, "Thank you for finally knocking." He walked out, and I knew that was all I needed. Not a perfect ending, not a full circle reunion, just the truth, laid bare, without makeup, without spin. Justice had been served. But forgiveness, that would come in time, if it ever did. The door clicked shut behind him, and I let the quiet settle in again, not as a punishment, but as peace. Because not every story ends with applause. Some just end with the sound of a lock sliding gently into place. The house felt different now, not louder, not quieter, just lighter. As if some heavy curtain had finally been drawn back and let real sunlight through, the kind that warmed the skin instead of casting harsh shadows. It had been 3 weeks since Ethan visited. Since then, I hadn't heard another word from him. But I didn't need to. He had returned what mattered. Not money, not apologies, just truth. And truth was finally enough. Kaylee, on the other hand, wasn't so quiet. The court hearing made the papers. Fraud, financial abuse, identity theft, embezzlement through marriage. They gave her 7 years, no chance of early parole due to obstruction. Her face was splashed across the local news. Once praised as the stylish daughter-in-law of a respected farming family, now branded as a predator who used seduction like a scalpel. I didn't celebrate. I just exhaled, deeply. The land was mine again, officially. The revised deed was filed, notarized, and final. The crooked amendments Kaylee had snuck in while I was hospitalized were declared void. My signature had been forged. The investigator proved it. And Clarence's old military friend, a retired forensic analyst, had caught the error in the ink age. I still lived in the same bedroom, same curtains, same quilt I stitched 30 years ago. But now I kept the window open at night. I slept better with fresh air, even if the coyotes sang in the distance. One afternoon, I took a walk through the east orchard. The apple trees had begun to bud. The breeze tugged at my sleeves, and I let it. No need to brace anymore. No reason to pretend I didn't feel things. At the far end of the orchard, beneath the shade of an old maple, sat Clarence. 2 folding chairs, a thermos, and a piece of pie wrapped in wax paper. "You've been walking longer these days," he said, handing me the slice. "I've been breathing better," I replied. He nodded like he understood, because he did. We sat there for a while, not talking, just being. Eventually, he broke the silence. "You thinking about selling? The land?" He nodded. "No, not yet. Maybe not ever. But I'm thinking about leasing part of it. Start a program, use it for something better than family greed." "Like what?" I shrugged. "Training ground for women who've been through hell. Farming teaches patience, strength. It rebuilds you. Something Kaylee never understood. The land gives, but only if you give first." Clarence smiled, then pulled something from his pocket. A small wooden keychain. It was etched with the word resilience. He handed it to me. One of my patients carved that during rehab. Said he made it after losing his wife, his leg, and his house all in 1 year. He said the only thing that kept him going was remembering he still had the ability to rebuild. I turned the keychain in my hand. Rebuild. That was what this was. Not revenge, not punishment, restoration. The next morning I went into town, signed the final papers at the land office, but this time I added a clause. Upon my passing, the east portion of the farm would be placed in a trust. It would not go to family, not to Ethan, not to any bloodline. It would become a retreat for women over 60, survivors, abandoned mothers, widows, warriors. A place with strong coffee, dirt under the nails, and silence that heals. I left the office, walked down the street, and past the bakery. Inside, the woman behind the counter waved at me. Her name was Denise. She had once been married to a drunk who emptied her accounts and vanished. She now owned the bakery outright. I waved back. Healing comes in moments like that. Quiet nods. Eye contact that says I see you and you made it. The final call from Ethan came on a Sunday. I was on the porch when the phone rang. I picked up. "Just wanted you to know. It's not mine. The baby." I said nothing. "But I'm still going to help. Not her, but the child. He didn't ask to be born into this mess. I respect that." He paused. "Mum, I'm not coming back. Not like before. I don't deserve to walk those halls again. But if you ever need anything, I'll come. Just say the word." I said thank you. And goodbye. Then I hung up. And that was the end of it. I sat on the porch, the wind brushing my skin like a whisper. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like something was chasing me. Because it was all behind me now. Not buried. Transformed. Pain into purpose. Grief into ground. Rage into roots. And me, still standing. Still here. Still whole. If this story made your heart ache or your fists clench, you're not alone. I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to walk away from someone you raised, someone you loved, just to protect your peace. Share your story in the comments. And if you stayed till the end, thank you for holding space for mine.